Hello and welcome to episode 40 of Match It and the Other Guy. And Kevin and I are sitting outside my home on the banks of Lake Wylie in Charlotte, North Carolina on a grey and overcast day. It was raining earlier, Kevin, but it has stopped.
But it is much cooler and much more pleasant for this time of year. Much more.
Yesterday, I know I constantly complain about the humidity, but yesterday out here, it was just like sitting in a sauna. To me, it was unbearable.
Hence, I was inside most of the day.
Yeah, exactly. It seems so awful during the summertime to lock yourself away out of the sun, but I have to.
Oh, yeah, I don't blame you a bit.
Can't function.
I'm going to do the exact same thing.
Well, as ever, I never know what we're going to be talking about. You do. Kick us off. What are we going to be talking about today?
Well, I think today's topic is very timely as we've just started the Olympics in Tokyo.
Yes. Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So I thought we'd have a little discussion about the Olympics since it's right on top of everyone's mind right now.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not a great fan of the Olympics, but I don't wish that to sound like I really don't care about them whatsoever. I'm just not drawn into it in the way that many other people are. How are you with the Olympics? Is it a big thing with you?
I enjoy them each year. I look forward to them each year. I don't have to watch every minute of every bit of coverage, but I like to tune into the highlights and stuff. And nowadays, with them showing on so many different versions of the network, you see a lot of coverage during parts of the day, whereas used to, everything would be compiled to your primetime viewing when everyone was home from work. So you have a lot of opportunities. I'll put it on in my shop and have it on during the day a lot.
Yeah. I know it's a great, it's a great occasion around the world, of course it is. How about, tell me one story of the Olympics. Try to get me more excited about the Olympics than I've ever been. Tell me one great story of the Olympics from your perspective. Say from an American perspective. Tell me something about the Olympics from an American perspective that really did it for you.
That one's an easy one to answer, and it has to be the Miracle on Ice. Because not only do I think it's a great Olympic moment, in my recollection, anytime I think about this topic, it's, to me, the greatest moment in sports history.
Wow.
I'm sure that's quite arguable with many other people.
Sure.
But to me, I think that is the penultimate moment in sports.
Great. Okay. Well, we've picked on a great topic then. So explain it to me. I'm aware of the Miracle on Ice, but only very, very vaguely in terms of detail. Ice hockey.
Ice hockey.
Okay. And which Olympics?
This was the 1980 Lake Placid.
Yeah. Okay.
In the U.S. So it was in our own country, which was great. So it was the Lake Placid Olympics in '80, and we were taking on, our number of teams, obviously, but toward the end we had to take on the Russians.
Yes.
Which was like David and Goliath.
Right.
And the Russians, I think, had dominated for probably decades in the Olympics. And it was no question they were going to come in, and we were not going to be a blip on their radar in their quest for gold.
Okay.
And they were, the best of the Russian players that have been, for quite some time. And our group was essentially pulled in from different college programs and such like that. So they were I don't know if ragtag's the right word, but, brought in from different groups and stuff. They're, young, essentially amateurs. I think maybe a couple had played semi-pro maybe or something like that at best.
Yes.
And, again, probably never trained together and all that, and were brought together to form this Olympic team led by Herb Brooks. Herb Brooks was the head coach.
Okay.
And
so just for my education here, there were effectively no professional players in the team for the United States. Is that all the Olympics? Is the Olympics like that anyway?
It was at that time.
It was at that time.
And
right.
I can't remember when they it must have been within the next 12 years they changed it.
Yes.
To where you could have professional athletes from whatever country, you can have anybody.
Yeah,
because you're representing.
From my perspective, not knowing that much about the Olympics from the outside looking in, I would just say, well, if I've been trying to put the best ice hockey team together for the Olympics, I would say him and him and him and him and him from 6 different teams, whatever it would be, and they're the best in the United States. We'll use those guys, but you couldn't do that back then.
Yeah,
right.
Well, which is kind of funny because if you do that, which I guess they do these days, obviously, so many of the hockey teams were foreign anyway, that they'd probably go back to represent their own country, and we would not be that great. I think you get a lot of Canadians and probably Russians and such like that. I'm not sure where they mainly come from. I don't follow the NHL that much, but they'd probably be back representing their own country anyway during the Olympics, and we wouldn't have, the greatest, quote, dream team like we had in basketball and such like that. But the Miracle on Ice, it was so funny because people look back on it, and I think they remember it kind of differently or kind of more of a legend. It wasn't the gold medal game.
Oh, I always thought it was.
No, it actually happened. I think I know it was on a Friday, and it might have been 5 in the afternoon, early evening, or something like that. So it kind of wasn't, that big of cover. So a lot of people didn't get to see it live anyway.
Right. So it was a forgive me if I got the terminology wrong, but it was a qualifying game to get towards gold, was it?
Yeah, I mean, it was the eliminations.
The eliminations,
it was the next whatever.
Yeah.
And so not that many people got to see it live.
Okay.
And it just became, the legend after that. But I think they replayed it that evening. But the other part of that was once they did beat them, which was just amazing. And thanks to YouTube, you can go back and watch all this footage and the final seconds and the announcer screaming, "Do you believe in miracles?" and all that, which is just again what's made it to me the greatest moment.
Yeah.
But they still had one hurdle. They still had to take on Finland. So it wasn't the gold medal at that point.
Right.
It was, we still have one more speed bump in the road.
Yeah.
And so they had to take on Finland, which I think 2 days later maybe they played them, and fortunately beat them. Though they were lagging behind at the halftime, at the half.
Yes.
And had to come back from that to win and get gold.
And do you think they were so buoyed and given an extra boost of confidence from the way that they played against the Russian team that helped them in that goal against Finland?
I'm sure.
I mean, absolutely on top of their game. I mean, they must have been so thrilled to have beat the Russians in elimination match.
Yeah, I don't think you had time to be jaded. We've got to get busy and we've got to take on Finland, and you've got to go.
Yeah.
And I've read that when they did come into the locker room during the half, and that the coach really kind of gave them a good speech with some pretty colorful metaphors about how this, you'll regret this till your graves if you don't beat this Finnish team.
It's now or never. It's one of those things.
Yeah. So they came out and shined. And another thing, go back and look at it. It's again part of the Miracle on Ice story, but when they did the medal ceremony, they did it on the rink, and I guess you just had one person represent, or maybe one or two people representing you, and I believe it was Mike Eruzione who was the captain.
Okay.
And he takes the gold medal, and of course he's just probably overcome with emotion and everything like that. But and then when they kind of are finishing up, I think he turns around to the team and gives them a come on, and they all he said to this day, I've seen documentaries before, and he said, how on earth we got all of us up there on that tiny podium, but we did it, and they were all standing up there together. And I tell you, I just don't think there's ever been a greater moment in sports. I mean, again, that's quite arguable, and there's many great moments, but to me, and I'm not a huge hockey fan, but that really is just it for me.
Yes. Well, that is a very inspiring tale, and now that you've shared that with me, I will have a look on YouTube tonight, because I am absolutely sure that'll be on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
There's almost everything in the world is on YouTube these days. I know we keep referencing it in our podcast, but I'd love to go back and see that.
So let's go to you. What moments have inspired you, Olympic-wise?
Well, as I said, at the start of this episode, I'm not really overly attracted to the Olympics, so I don't follow it. Though I am always inspired by the story of real people doing real things, as you know, in any walk of life, whether it's an Olympic athlete or a coal miner in England in the 1920s. It doesn't matter to me. It's the story that always attracts me. And of course, when you look at the Olympics, you are seeing athletes, men and women that have trained and trained and trained to be the absolute best of their game. And so I can understand that the Olympics is always a wonderful treasure trove of stories for that very reason, because you're seeing the best in the world competing against the best in the world.
Exactly.
And that's full of fantastic stories. But the one story that always stands out in my mind, and I'm speaking now from growing up in England, was a chap called Eddie the Eagle. Does that name ring a bell to you?
I've heard of it somewhere along the line. Yeah.
Well, his name is actually Michael. It was Michael Edwards is his actual name, but he gained this name Eddie Edwards at school. But he represented Britain in the '88 Olympics, which was at Calgary, I believe.
Sounds right.
And he represented Britain as a ski jumper. Now, Great Britain, I should say, not represented England, it was representing the nation of Great Britain. Great Britain were very, very poor in this discipline, as one might imagine. It was not something that they excelled at. But Eddie the Eagle put his hand up and said, I'll have a go. I will try this. And so he was entered as the British entry for ski jumping. Now, with all due respect to Eddie, I think he came last in the two disciplines. Lengths of jump, I think, however you describe ski jumping. And I think he was last. But that's not the point of the story to me. The point of the story is that he was prepared to have a go. And this is my opinion, and I may be wrong, but I feel that the Olympic Committee, having seen Eddie not being very good as a ski jumper but representing Britain, actually changed the rules of entry for following years of competition. So they would have excluded Eddie the Eagle's efforts because he wasn't good enough.
I mean, that's when they think they might have bringing in the pros.
I think they did. I think they.
Well, if it's 88 to 92, we know there was a change. So.
Yes, but to me, I have to say, if that's the case, I couldn't disagree more with that, because if you take the Olympic Games to its absolute grassroots, go right back through thousands of years to ancient Greece, all of those original disciplines would have been military exercises. They would have been, the throwing of the javelin. Well, we can see that from a spear. The discus throwing, we can see that through it being a weapon. And the shot putting, I assume, would have been moving cannonballs around. But most especially the marathon running, and also most particularly, I would say, the relay race, would surely have been military messengers taking one message from a regiment to another regiment as fast as possible. 2,000-3,000 years ago, there were no field telephones, for example, so runners were vitally important. So I'm sure all those disciplines were military-inspired exercises. Now, with that in mind, when you look at the ethos, the credo, I would say, of the Olympics, it is great athlete versus great athlete. Yes, we see that. But it's also, of course, it is a competition between nations. Is it not? The United States versus Russia versus Great Britain versus France, on and on and on. It is nation against nation in sporting competition, which is a terrific thing. Mm-hmm. But of course, again, you take it back to its early roots, that would have been nation defending each other against an invading force. Now, if you looked at the great invading armies of ancient Rome, for example, or ancient Egypt or Greece, these countries would have had very mighty, powerful armies. And they were invading many smaller countries that realistically didn't stand a chance of defending themselves against the might of ancient Rome. Let's use that as an example. But it did. I'm getting to the point here. It didn't stop the warriors of those smaller countries that knew they were going to be defeated from standing up in competition against superior forces. It was tiny country A versus ancient Rome, tiny country B versus the might of ancient Greece. And so, in terms of what Eddie the Eagle was doing for Great Britain, he was prepared to stand up for Great Britain, knowing that he would be defeated, but still being prepared to have a go. And that is the very basis of what the Olympic Games is all about. It is sporting competition between athletes. It's sporting competitions between countries. And Britain were prepared just to stand up and try. That's right. What it was, right?
Yeah, because you can just be an average citizen and just decide, like he did, that I'm going to go for this.
Yeah.
And it may be something you've done somewhat. It may be one of those that I've never tried it, but I'm going to. And if there's a dearth of that in your country, you may weave your way through the ranks and make it all the way to where you can compete. And anyone is welcome to do that. And we see more and more sports come to the forefront that were kind of, I didn't even know this was an Olympic thing because it was never covered.
Right.
But now you'll see, how long is, we've actually kind of paid attention to curling for a few decades now.
Yes.
Whereas that would have never gotten coverage.
Yeah.
But a lot of just average Joes.
Just standing up and saying, "I'll have a go."
That's right. And who
And
knows,
I
their
think-
skill may be the best they've ever seen. They never knew they had it. But
I think in terms of Michael Edwards, Eddie the Eagle, I think he came under a fair amount of criticism from Britain too. Imagine that, if you will. And countries always like to support people to an extent and then crush their hopes. And I think Eddie the Eagle came under reasonable criticism from his own country, Great Britain in this case, and others around the world, I'm sure, with the idea that he's just bandstanding, he just wants to be seen to be in the Olympics. Well, I'm sure to a degree that's the case, that Eddie the Eagle wanted to be in the Olympics. But which athlete from any country doesn't want to be in the Olympics? That's why they're there. They train their best to be in the Olympics. Everybody wants to be in the Olympics. But I always came away with the impression, reading of Eddie's events years ago now, it happened a long while ago, 40-something years ago, that I think if anybody else who was a superior ski jumper had tapped Eddie on the shoulder and said, "Eddie, thanks very much, but I am better than this, better than you at doing this," Eddie would have just stood to one side and said, "Have at it." But there is nobody else. I'm prepared to have a go because there is nobody else. And I think that's a great story about the Olympics, is just being prepared to have a go. But Eddie himself, I think in later life, he actually had quite a successful career. He went on to feature in TV shows. I think he even hosted a couple of TV shows, had guest appearances on Dancing with the Stars, or whatever it would be, And fairly recently, there was a movie made about his career with Hugh Jackman involved. I can't remember the title of it. I'm going to guess it was Eddie the Eagle, but I'm sure we can find out that title via the internet. But that movie, I think, if it came out in 2017, 2018, somewhere around there, I think it was the best grossing film of Great Britain in that year. So his story has been remembered. I just think it's a great story of what, again, the Olympics taking it right down to its grassroots. That is what the Olympics should be. Someone standing up and having a go.
yeah, and it's become beloved folklore of Britain, it sounds like, his story anyway. Which I think, it kind of harkens to the Jamaican bobsled team.
It's the
How does an
same.
island decide,
Yes.
well, why not?
Yeah, but I cannot agree. And again, I may be wrong, and I don't want to speak out of turn. So again, this is just my opinion. But if the rules were changed to prevent real, let's describe them as rank amateurs. I mean, they're absolute amateurs in a particular sport. But if the rules were changed to prevent that level of enthusiasm at grassroots level from being a part of the Olympic Games, I can't agree with that.
Yeah.
I can't agree with that. Yes, we want to see the best athletes in the world, and 99.9% of the time we do. But there's nothing to stop a bobsleigh team from an island coming and taking part in the Olympics. Why not?
No,
Absolutely,
If you're a
why
country
not?
and you can come represent, do it. I mean, I love it actually when they do the opening ceremonies and they do the parade of nations.
Yeah.
And whereas U.S. is usually pretty late because I think they call us United States, so we're way down the alphabetical line. But it's we'll bring in however many, a couple of hundred, maybe. And then there's that one country that'll literally have two athletes, the flag, and one of them's holding it, and maybe the other athletes, the other one comes. It's like two athletes for whatever, and they, of course, on the broadcast, and they will be representing in this sport, and stuff like that. And you're like going, you really want to root for them big time.
Of course you do.
Because wouldn't it be great for them to medal?
Yeah, and look at the smile on those athletes' faces. They are just beyond thrilled to be there.
Oh yeah.
Again, in whatever discipline.
And they may have scratched and scrimped and stuff, and the whole country may have done everything they could just to get them there.
Just to get them there.
So I love that. But it does go back, to what you're talking about. I don't know how I feel about the professional thing being part of it. Too. Let's say the Dream Team was it '92? I think was the first year.
Okay.
And I mean, it was like well, they're going to win the medal. Well, they should win the medal. They're the best NBA players brought from all over the world. Mostly from America, but still. And I'm like, in a way, they only have it to lose. They're fully expected to mow over everybody. And if they were to be beaten by some oddball country, it's like you come back and go, oh, we're going to renegotiate your contract. because if you can't beat, this little whatever, it's only like, but and then it's not exciting to watch just somebody that's so superior come in and just mow them down. And then, they celebrate and then they, get their gold. And I don't know if they were on the Wheaties box or not. They might have been. But
I don't know how I feel about that. I find myself in a state of conflict really about it, because again, I understand the sporting heritage of the Olympics and all of that, and it's a wonderful thing. We've just talked about that. But also, again, if you take it back to grassroots level, when it was the country's best warriors versus another country's best warriors, wouldn't you want the best players in your country to be representing? Yeah.
And I've always thought I seem to remember there was kind of a gray area when it had to be amateur athletes. I think some countries very much fudged that. I think America was, we had a lot of pro teams of different things and had those structures and those defined lines of you've gone pro, you got a contract, I think a lot of the other countries were bringing over or bringing to whatever country they were hosting. And maybe there was a fudging of where they could bring their best, but we had to keep our amateur status only with whomever was representing us. So.
Yeah.
And once you open it up to all pro, it's just anybody. But speaking of the NBA, Yao Ming would represent China. So
Okay.
in the Olympics, he would play for China.
Yeah.
Whereas he obviously played for the NBA when he was part of his regular career. And they're opening up more and more and more sports, it seemed like, coming, which is good and interesting. And I think if they don't get the coverage and don't find it's viable, they may drop them again. Yeah, they're bringing in new things and such like that. And
I don't understand. I must say, please educate me if you can on this. Why particular sports I've never been a part of the Olympics. Again, maybe I'm answering my own question by saying, if you take it back to grassroots, they were all military exercises and stem from there. And can you say that golf has a part of the Olympics? I don't know. I'm picking one sport at random and saying that, or
which is one of the fairly recent additions.
Yeah.
So. Now, also the other things I love, looking back, is the traditions. And speaking of '92, I think another great moment in the Olympics, it's my absolute favorite as far as this goes, was how they lit the cauldron. That was
'92 Barcelona.
Barcelona.
Yeah, okay, right.
And the lighting of the cauldron was done by the archer.
And how did that happen?
And they were in the stadium or whatever and had done all that big program.
Yeah.
And the archer comes out, and of course he's from Spain, and they light the tip of the arrow, and he points it up in the air.
No kidding.
And lets her go, and it flies up and into the cauldron, and whoosh comes up the
and that wasn't
the
done
cauldron.
on wires or anything. That was legit one shot with
It
an
was
arrow.
one shot.
Wow.
But I have gone back and looked. I mean, you're in a stadium, and where's that thing going? Because it arcs over.
That's right.
They must have just cleared everything in that zone. And I probably think there's probably a switch that actually turned on the full fire. I don't know that the actual fire from the arrow is probably more ceremonial when it hit.
But nevertheless, the arrow hit the dish, hit the cauldron.
It's what it looks like on the video to me.
Yeah.
And I said there will never be a better lighting ever than that. They've done ones where they walk up and touch it and whatever. And then it's so funny because that was summer, and the next summer was the U.S., and it was '96 in Atlanta. And God love him, it was Muhammad Ali, which was wonderful to have him up there, and he was the final lighter. He was the lighter of the torch.
Okay.
And the last runner presented it to him, which was phenomenal. But it was kind of on this like wire pulley system. He lit this thing, and the wire pulley kind of ricketed its way up to the top, and I went, it was just, it wasn't that.
Not as spectacular as 92.
No, by any stretch. But '96 was also the one I actually attended the Olympics.
Did you enjoy that?
Getting to go to the Olympics is a very special thing.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And how it happened was, I was working at Goody's Family Clothing, which we've touched on, in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Okay.
Which isn't it's 4 hours from Atlanta. Of course, there's a lot of hubbub, for a few years leading up to it.
Sure.
And, it's happening in Atlanta with all the construction they're building and changing.
Yeah.
And we were still going down for concerts and stuff occasionally, so we'd see the changes happening. And I was just working one day during that Olympic, sometime 2 weeks, and one of the people in the media department kind of just walked through the advertising department and as she walked by my desk, said something along the line, "Hey, anybody want Olympic tickets for tomorrow?" And I just, without missing a beat, spun my chair around and said, "I'll take them." I didn't know what they were for or whatever, but a chance to go to the Olympics, absolutely. And it
With
was
Olympic nimbleness, you turned around in your chair and
yes,
right.
spun like, and it was for equestrian show jumping.
Oh, all right, yeah.
So I'm like, hey, it could be anything.
You sure?
I'm going.
Yeah.
So called up my roommate and said, hey, can you get out tomorrow and we'll head on down to Atlanta? And he said, yeah, I can take off. So we headed on down early in the morning and made our way to Atlanta. And it was actually, it was on the outskirts of Atlanta, which of course many sports, they have to go out away from all the
they're all in
main
different arenas around Atlanta.
There's arenas, and then, exactly. There's the ones they built. But then if it's going to be whitewater rafting, obviously it's going to be at a river, which is X amount of miles away.
Yeah.
And this was at the Georgia Horse Park. I may be saying it wrong, but somewhere I have the picture of me standing with the sign. But anyway, and so we drove out there and spent many hours watching them show jump, and then, after a good bit of that, we said, well, we don't know this sport that well, and we've seen a bunch of it, and I think we're going to see the same for a few more hours. So now let's go back in and enjoy the Olympic Village and go see this stuff. But, I spent a good amount of time at the event, and then we went in and did some other fanfare things.
So with your tickets to the equestrian show jumping, you were allowed entry to all the arenas that day, or
No. It was the Olympic Village was probably like the communal area where everybody could go. Anybody could just come from Atlanta, wherever, and walk around, and they had probably exhibits and such like that. But yeah, if you were going to go into like the aquatic center that day, you obviously had to have a ticket for that event during the Olympics time. But
now, how do you stand on this thorny issue? And again, I'm far from expert on the Olympics, but I know I've heard this keeps cropping up every time there's an Olympics. How do you stand on this thorny issue of the incredible expense that each country has to deal with on building an Olympic facility that gets used once and never gets used again? And this argument of, well, maybe we just talked about, going right back to its grassroots history. Maybe we should go back to one of the Greek islands and build a purpose-built facility there that all the summer games, for example, will happen in Greece. We don't have to keep spending these billions of dollars around the world on facilities that get used hardly ever. Where are you on that? Do you think that's a good thing, a bad thing?
I think it depends on the country usually. Some countries are able to continue using them as an aquatic center or as a youth facility or whatever, and hopefully they've done quite well of maintaining them and finding a use for them. And I think again, I'm not an economist, and I'm certainly not part of the Olympic Committee and how they plan or the countries that host, but I guess they always balance it out like we're going to get that much more in revenue of people attending, spending money while they're here. The hype and whatever else they get balances out to a better. But I'm sure in fact, I know there's many events or years of the Olympics where they've gone massively into debt.
Yes.
And I don't know, again, who's the person or who's the committee that decides how that's going to work. But it is so sad to see the ones that go into disrepair and just get wasted completely afterwards.
I'm sure that's something that the Olympics try not to focus on, but I'm also 99% sure that there are facilities that have just gone into disrepair and never get used and just fall away into nothingness.
Yeah,
which is terribly sad.
Sarajevo is always the one that I think of because it's just become it was a war zone, and all the you'll see pictures or videos on YouTube of what's left of the old bobsledding course and stuff like that. Now it's just been destroyed and everything like that.
And again, I might be about to suggest something that has already been happening for decades as far as I'm aware, but it strikes me that those facilities with more care and attention could be repurposed into something else. Perhaps that already happens. I'm probably saying, well, maybe the Olympic Village could become apartments and sold off and money generated that way. And perhaps that is already happening. But that would strike me as a solution to this conundrum of, well, we've just spent X million/billion dollars in building this thing. What do we do with it now?
Yeah. And I think it's literally every country, when they finish up, handles it differently probably. And how well they do it is to be seen decades down the line.
One would like to believe that all of the host nations get together and offer their advice. Well, we built this and it didn't really work, but if you'd built it like that, then that would have been better. Or I would suggest you don't build it there because it's very difficult to get to it after the games. Why don't you build that facility somewhere else?
Yeah,
Yeah. I hope that's the case.
And I think more than ever, probably now, they really have pressure on them to build alternative energy sources for using them and stuff like
Yeah,
that. There's probably more of that. And
never
of course,
thought
the
of that.
technology's gone rapidly improved. Who knows what they're doing over in Tokyo, but
Yeah.
hopefully it will come out and be a positive thing for them throughout the many decades to come. So.
Yeah. Well, we better think about bringing this episode. That was interesting.
Are you ready to have the closing ceremonies? Is that what you're saying?
You're so much better at this stuff than I am.
We're about to the cauldron will be extinguished and we'll move on.
Yeah. Well, I think that was it. I enjoyed. I didn't really know anything about the Miracle on Ice before we. I mean, I was aware of it, but I hadn't really heard of it. And I'm not sure if you was aware of Eddie the Eagle's exploits, but two great stories.
And there's many more, related to Olympic athletes and stuff that are out there, and more to come. Hopefully, these this couple of weeks will provide some.
Yeah.
So.
Well, gentle listener, I hope you enjoyed that too. And do please join us again for another episode of Match It and the Other Guy. So from me, it's bye-bye. And from Kevin, it's...
Bye-bye as well.
Yeah.
See you then.